Hello. Check 1 2. Students, good morning. I hope you are hearing me. Once you're hearing me clearly, please indicate so in the chat section on YouTube. So if you're hearing me clearly, you can say yes, you're hearing me. If you're not hearing me clearly, you can also indicate that. So all the communication will be done in the chat section of the YouTube platform. So I'm seeing Olivia present. I'm seeing Ellington present. Right, so far I'm seeing 4 persons, so 4 students are on. So students, in terms of the YouTube live, it will be streamed live. Unless, for example, you're not able to attend class, you can still go on the YouTube channel and you will actually see the class itself. So the class will be recorded live and you can replay it over and over. So the content will always be on YouTube. So what is going on now, it will always be on YouTube. So if you're absent from the class, don't worry about it. You just click on the link and it will actually take you to the recording that is being done now. So I just giving the students some more time to actually log on, because I think I see about 15 persons in the WhatsApp group. Now during class you can also communicate via WhatsApp. I realize that Nelson in the WhatsApp group is asking where, so somebody can just resend or forward the link to her. So I'm giving the entire class permission. Once somebody is asking question like that in the group, where they should go for class, once you know where you should go for class, just indicate to the persons, because I might not see the WhatsApp text sometime. Alright, so students are going to actually start now. So in terms of what we're going to look at, the topic that we're going to focus on today is the human skeleton system. Just bringing up the syllabus so you can have an idea as to what exactly we will be looking at. Right, so this is the syllabus. So the human skeletal system, so this now what you're seeing on the screen now, this is exactly what we will be looking at in terms of the human skeletal system. So the first point is saying that students should be able to identify the major bones of the skeletal system. And to the right there, these are the bones. These would say that these are the major bones of the human skeletal system. So what that simply means is that the human skeletal system basically have more bones. It is just that these are the major one. So there is no way we can spend the entire school year looking at all of the bones that make up the human skeletal system. So we will just be focusing on the major ones. Then after completing looking at the major bones, we'll now move on to the structures of the skeletal system and also looking at their functions. So for persons who want a copy of the syllabus, I'm definitely going to post it in the WhatsApp group or via your Gmail. So I will be posting the syllabus itself, because I think it is very important that you have the syllabus so that you can actually go through the syllabus and ensure that you're covering all of the contents. So I'm going to make the syllabus available for the class also. Okay, students, so I think I'm going to start now. I think I have enough students to actually start the class. As I said before, those persons that might not join today, you can indicate to them, or you can just send them the link for them to watch the video. So let's start now, students. So move on to the first slide. Let me just increase. Right, perfect. So what is the human skeletal system? Now, when you look at the heading there, student, you will see I have skeletal at the top there. But for the first pointer, you see I have TON, skeleton. That is simply because you can use either word. It does not matter which one you actually use it. So you can say skeletal or you can say skeleton. So the first pointer is saying that the human skeleton is part of the support system in humans. So in terms of support, what they basically mean is that different organs, different body parts actually help to give the human body shape, help to support the human body. So one of the main functions of the skeletal system is to offer that in terms of support. The second pointer, it is a strong internal framework. So what you're seeing here in terms of the picture of the human skeletal system, I'm sure that whenever you look at somebody in terms of looking at them externally, there is no way you can see these bones. So you just looking at somebody, looking at your classmate, looking at a family member, looking at a stranger on the road, there is no way you can see, you can literally see their bones or touch their bones. That is simply because the human skeletal system, it is internal, it is within the human body. That simply means that it is covered by your skins. So that's why the second pointer is saying that it is a strong internal framework. Let's move on to the third pointer. It has two major parts. So the entire human skeletal system that you're looking at now, what they would have done is that they would have put it into two different sections, or if you want to say categories, no problem. So the two main divisions of the human skeletal system are the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. So that's what we're going to move into next. We're now going to look at these two divisions. So moving on to the next slide. So as you can see, the heading, divisions of the skeleton system. Now, students, in terms of the PowerPoint that you're seeing now, I think I would have posted in the WhatsApp group. So in terms of notes, you don't have to necessarily write any notes now. Please, you don't need to waste any time and write notes. Just listen for the explanation and, of course, focus. You will get the notes. So I will post the notes in the WhatsApp group, and I will also put it on the Google Classroom platform. Right, so let's look at the two divisions. So we have the axial skeleton, so that's the first one I'm going to look at. So down there are giving us 4 bones that make up the axial skeleton. So we have your ribs, sternum, spine, and the skull. So let's go back to the diagram. So in terms of the parts, so the ribs, so looking at the diagram here, so these are known as the ribs, and we actually have 24 ribs. That simply means that we have 12 pairs. So if I should give you a monthly test or an end of term or end of year test, a quiz, I can ask you to basically give me 2 bones, give me 1 bone that actually make up the axial skeletal division. So right away you should be telling me that your ribs, that is an example of bone. Now they also said that the skull, so the skull is another component of the axial skeleton. They said the spine, so this is the spine right here, other also known as the backbone. So the spine actually ends there, so going up right to the back, right to the bottom section of the neck section. Right, so here we have other examples of the system. So looking at it from side view, so this is the backbone right there going up, also known as the spine. So with this front view also showing it there. So this is what is known as the spine. So start from the bottom section or the base of the neck round the back there. Increase it right. So starting from the base of the neck right there, going right down. So this is known as your backbone or your spine. So that's another component of the axial skeleton. So in terms of component, the sternum. So let's look at the sternum. Where is the sternum? Now the sternum is this bone right there. It is also known as the breastbone. So if I should give you a question again in terms of quiz or multi test, and I ask you to give me an example or give me one bone that is a part of the axial skeleton, you can say the sternum or the breastbone. So if I ask you for two, I don't want student to be giving me sternum and they also give me breastbone. You will only get 1 mark, simply because sternum and breastbone is the same thing. So please bear that in mind. Now, students, in terms of question, if you want to ask a question, you can ask that question via the chat section of the YouTube live, because I'm monitoring the chat section. So if you want to ask a question, then you can do that. If you're going to step away from your device, you can say, sir, excuse me for a minute, or you understand? So please keep the communication going. Right, so let's move on. So looking at the other division of the human skeletal system, now we're going to move on to what is known as the Appendicular Skeleton. Now again, this division, it is made up of 4 different bones. We have the upper limb, the lower limb, the hip, and the girdles. So I'm going to go back to the diagram and show you those on the skeletal system. So in terms of the upper limbs, those are of course both arms, so the right and the left. They also said that the lower limbs, so that include both legs. Hip, going back to the diagram, so this is the hip section right there. So again, in terms of quiz question or monthly test, if I should ask you to give me 2 components that make up the appendicular skeleton, then you should give me the hip as one of the option. Now, what is the shoulder girdle? Now, the shoulder girdle, of course, comprises of 2 different bones. This one right across the front section of the skeletal system, that is known as the clavicle, and to the back of the human body at the extreme top. When you touch somebody at the back, you will realize that there is a bone that is actually flat. That bone is known as the scapula. So the scapula and the clavicle together make up what is known as the shoulder girdle. So for those persons, if anybody is just joining, again, we just basically just start just looking at what is the human skeletal system, and then looking at the divisions of the human skeletal system. So again, guys, just remember that the skeletal system is divided into 2 divisions, and they are pretty easy to recall. So we have the axial skeleton and we have the appendicular skeleton. So in terms of me asking questions about these divisions, I'm quite sure that I will be asking you to give me bones that make up both divisions. Alright, so moving on. So the next subtopic that we're going to look at is the functions of the human skeletal system. So now we're going to look at the functions. No questions. I'm not seeing anybody posting any question. Is there something that you want me to explain or go over? Something that you're not clear on? Alright, so I'll continue until somebody posts a question in relation to explanation. So in terms of functions, we have several functions. I think we'll be looking at about 5, 6 thereabout. So the first one is protection. So again, in terms of question, I can ask you to list or give me 2 functions of the human skeletal system. So if I ask you to give me 1 function of the human skeletal system, then protection would be 1. So right away you can just say protection and that's it. You would get your 1 mark. But I can extend that question, give you a part B to that question, and ask you to give me an example in terms of protection. So example, for example, is the skull and the rib cage have a protective function. For example, the skull protects the brain and the rib cage protects the lungs and heart. Now let's look for a diagram. Looking for a diagram to show you in terms of protection. Right, so look at this image here. Right, so as you can see, so we have the both lungs, the right lungs and the left lungs. Now, if you look carefully, you will actually see that the rib cage actually surround these 2 lungs. So that simply means that both lungs there within that cage that is known as the rib cage. So let's say, for example, you should get a hit on your chest and your stomach, then definitely that impact not going to actually touch the lungs directly. That is simply because the lungs would be protected by your rib cage. So that's one example. So on the slide that you're seeing now, there are 2 examples. So if I should ask you to give me, no, not 2, there are 3 examples. If I should ask you to give me examples in terms of protection or how the human skeletal system protect or offer protection, then right away you can say the skull protect the brain, that is 1. The rib cage protect organs such as the lungs and your heart. And the third one on the slide here is the vertebral column protects the spinal cord. Now the vertebral column, students, it is also what is known as your spine, and it is also what is known as your backbone. So all those 3 mean the same thing. The backbone, the spine, and the vertebral column, they are the same thing, just using different terms. So again, in terms of function, so protection is the function itself. As for examples of how the skeletal system protect body parts, then you can say the skull protect the brain, the rib cage protect organs such as lungs and the heart, and of course the vertebral column protects the spinal cord. So let's move on to another function. Right, so on this slide now we have 2 different functions. We have support and we have movement / locomotion. So again, in terms of listing, in terms of question, I can ask you to give me 3 functions of the human skeletal system. So if I ask you to list them, you just say protection 1, support 2, movement 3. If I ask for 4, don't if I ask for 4, support 1, protection 2, movement 3. Don't give me locomotion as the fourth one, simply because movement and locomotion in terms of function of the human skeletal system basically mean the same thing. So these are 3 more functions: production of blood cell, provide a framework, storage of minerals. So we have more than enough function for you to give me movement and locomotion, because movement and locomotion is the same thing. So please don't give me movement number 1, locomotion number 2, if I should ask you to give me 2 functions of the human skeletal system. So let's go into support. So the vertebral column, which also known as a backbone, and girdles mainly provide support. So I'm gonna go to do a diagram. I'm gonna bring up a diagram so I can explain, show you what is the girdle and how they offer support. Right, so here we go. So in terms of girdles, now the human skeletal system have 2 girdles: the shoulder girdle at the top there and the hip girdle there. So let's look at the shoulder girdle here. You're looking at 3 different views: front view, back view, and that is a side view. So up here is known as the girdle, the shoulder girdle. Now the shoulder girdle basically protect your neck. Not protect, I should say, support, because we're looking at the support function. Right, so girdles offer some amount of support. Now the vertebral column, also known as the backbone, as you can see, it is saying that it supports the head. So let's go back to a diagram. Right, so the hip girdle here, for example, will support the upper body or the trunk section of the body there, because the upper body need to sit on something in order for it to stand upright. So that is where the hip girdle come into play. So in terms of support, question again, if I ask you to give me a function of the skeletal system, you can just say support, and that's it. You will get your 1 mark. So now, if I should now extend the question again and ask you to give me an example of the human skeletal system offering some amount of support, then there you have those 2 pointers where they are saying that, for example, the vertebral column support the body and the head, or you can say the body and the neck. So let's move down to another function of the human skeletal system. Now we have movement / locomotion. So movement is moving a part of the body, while locomotion is the movement of the entire body. Now, from your knowledge of the characteristics of living things, I'm sure that by now you would have known that there's a difference between movement and locomotion in terms of definition in relation to the characteristics of living things. So as you can see, the pointer stated out very clear. There is nothing difficult to understand here. As I said, movement is whenever a part of the body is being moved. So movement is moving a part of the body. So let's say, for example, you're moving a finger, you're moving 2 fingers, or you're moving your just one of your arms, then that is considered to be movement. Now, locomotion is whenever the entire body is in motion. So that simply means that you're walking, you're running, you're swimming. You understand? So locomotion is completely different. Locomotion is whenever the entire body is moving. That is what is locomotion. The entire body in motion. So there's a big difference between movement and locomotion. Now moving down to the second pointer. Skeleton muscles are attached to bones. Therefore, when the associated muscles contract, they cause bones to move. So that's basically further explaining the whole concept in terms of movement slash locomotion. Now let's move on to some more functions of the human skeletal system. So we have production of blood cells. What this means is that the human skeletal system also make blood cells. So just bringing you to this diagram here. So this is a long bone. So the middle of the bone is known as the bone marrow. So this is where the blood cells are produced inside the marrow of your bone, or inside the bone marrows that of course are a part of your long bones. So bones that are called flat bones, those bones, they're not going to produce any blood cells. That is simply because those bones are flat bones, don't have any bone marrow. So bone marrow is only found in long bones, for example. You have some short bones that you will actually find bone marrow, but mostly in long bone. So the first pointer there, first function at the top there, production of blood cells. So the pointer is saying that the red bone marrow inside larger bones produce red blood cells, white blood cells, and of course platelets. So of course those are the blood cells. So those are the three blood cells. We have the red blood cell, we have the white blood cells, and of course platelets. So in terms of functions, listing all the functions that we would have covered, protection is one. Then we have support, then movement number 3, and now we're at production of blood cells. The next function of the human skeletal system is that it provides a framework. So that simply means that it gives the human body shape, right? So give the human body shape. So here we have a lot of images showing you the human skeletal system. So in terms of whichever position that the human skeletal system is in, or the human body is in, it is the skeletal system that gives the shape. So as you can see, this first one here appear to be walking. So whenever you're walking, you're sitting, you're sleeping, you're standing, just about any position that you're sitting in, it is the human skeletal system that allow you to be in that particular position. So it actually provide a framework or give the body shape. Understand? So looking at more diagrams. So let's say, for example, this individual holding out is our extending down the human skeletal system, provide that shape. Right, so whichever position you're in, it is the human skeletal system. So here we have someone there running. As you can see, the skeletal system forming that framework in terms of that movement. So the person would be here standing, for example. Then the person look like they're on their mark, meaning that they're going to start to run. Understand? So this one, the skeletal system is upright because the entire body is upright. Now the human body is kind of slanting forward, hence the human skeletal system going forward. Now this third one now, the human body is in motion, in locomotion, moving. And as you can see, the skeletal system is forming that shape there. So irrespective of the shape that your body is currently in, the human skeletal system provides that shape or that framework. So let's move on to our next function. Bone tissues, so storage of minerals. So the pointer is now saying that bone tissues store several minerals including calcium and phosphorus. So what this is saying is that whenever you consume food that contain these nutrients, calcium and phosphorus, the human body, for example, might not need all of those nutrients at the same, at that particular moment. So the human body will use up what it need to use at the moment, and the remainder or the additional will be stored in your bones. So that's why they are saying that storage of minerals. Now the last function, assistance in breathing. So this is another function of the human skeletal system, and a lot of persons normally wonder how comes or how can the human skeletal system assist or help you to breathe. Now, yes, that is correct. So the skeletal system assists when the diaphragm muscles contract and push the diaphragm up and outwards to expand the rib cage. This may more air enter the lungs. Now, while looking at the respiratory system, which I think I saw in the WhatsApp group where somebody said that yes, you would have gone through the respiratory system last year, so you should be at least have some idea as to what I'm talking about in terms of how your skeletal system assists or aid in the breathing process. So I'm gonna bring across a diagram. Right, so here is the rib cage with both lungs inside there. Now I'm gonna use example of balloon. Then you will realize that the more you blow air into a balloon, it is the more the balloon gonna expand, meaning that it's gonna get bigger in terms of size. It is the same thing with the human lungs. Once you're breathing in, that means you're taking in air, the lungs gonna expand, and the fact that the lungs are expanding, that simply means that they're gonna need more space to expand. So in terms of the rib cage now, what the rib cage will normally do is that the rib cage will go upwards and then outwards. Once the rib cage go upwards and outwards, that will actually make some more room or give the lungs some more space to actually expand. So just use your hands, so just use one of your hands, just make an upward movement with your hand and then go outward. You will realize that that space get larger. So just put your right hand or your left hand in front of your chest. Once you put it in front of your chest, just simple make an upward movement with that hand and then make an outward movement. Once you make that movement, you realize that the space gets larger. So that is the same thing that is taking place within the rib cage. So that normally takes place whenever you are breathing in. So that's one way in which the rib cage assists in the breathing process. Now, whenever you're breathing out now, what the rib cage normally do is that it actually go inwards towards the lungs, and if that movement actually generates some amount of pressure on the lungs, and that pressure help the lungs to force out the air or the exhaled air. So that is how the human skeletal system assists in breathing. So that should do it in terms of the different functions that make up that the human skeletal system are responsible for. So again, students, in terms of listing them, protection is 1. We have support 2, movement / locomotion 3. Then we have production of blood cell. Then we have provide a framework. then storage of minerals, and assistance in breathing. Right, so I'm quite sure you have more than enough function to answer a question that, for example, asks you to identify or list or give me three functions of the human skeletal system. Now I'm seeing in the WhatsApp group where somebody is saying that their internet is down. Again, students, if you fall in that situation where the internet is down, don't worry about you missing the class. It is just that you might not be able to be on it live. But let's say, for example, the internet down for the entire day and it don't come back until 8 o'clock tonight. 8 o'clock tonight, you just simply click on the link and it will take you to the recording of the class. So don't worry about you missing out in terms of that. Once you get back internet connectivity, then you're good to go in terms of being able to view the class. Now in the WhatsApp group, I'm seeing that Douglas is just coming on, saying that she's present. So persons who have direct contact to her, you can communicate to her and of course share the link with her. Alright, students, so the other subheading that we're going to move into is the tissues of the human skeleton. But before I go into the tissues of the human skeleton, I'm just going to give you a 3 minutes break because you're using devices in terms of screen, and I'm sitting in front of like 3 different monitors. So I need to take a break from the screens also. So I'm going to give you a 3-minute break. So I will be continuing the class at approximately 9:48. Okay, so 9:48. I'm going to continue the class there about 9:48, 9:50 there about. I will continue by going through the tissues that make up the human skeletal system. So you can go ahead and take a few minutes break, 3 minutes break there about. Yes, students, welcome back. Back live. Actually, going to continue, but before I continue, just have some clarification or answering some questions that persons are asking. So, I'm seeing where Alicia is asking, sir, are you going to send the notes in the group? No. Yes, I think I would have post the notes or the PowerPoint presentation 2 times in the group. So again, student, I will be posting the notes in the group. Within your own time, then you can write that notes. Please don't use the class time to write notes. Please use the class time to understand the content. You have more than enough time to write that notes. Let's see if any questions on WhatsApp to answer. Now I'm seeing where somebody is saying, sir, somebody is saying that they click on it and it is not coming up. No, that is simple because you might not have on any app on your device that allow you to open it. So you simply need to go to your Google Play Store and download the app that allow you to view PowerPoint presentation. Okay? So again, for persons who are having problem opening the file that I would have sent, that is a PowerPoint presentation, you have to install a application on your device that will allow you to open it. Okay? Alright, so I think I'm going to continue. Right, so let's go into the tissues that make up the human skeletal system. So the first one that we're looking at is bone. So bone is a living, hard, connective tissue. Now, this word very important. Now, persons might be wondering, are bones living, yes or no? And CXC always asks that question. Is bone a living tissue, yes or no? The answer to that question is yes. The next question CXC normally asks is why? Why do you say that bone is a living tissue? Now, student, the fact that a bone can increase in size, that alone explain why it is a living tissue. Because look at a small baby, for example. The bone, one of the bone that make up one of the baby's arm, you will see how short it is at that tender age. Now you look at that child at age 20, I'm sure that the bone gonna increase in length. So that simply means that it would have grown. So the fact that bones increase in size simply means that they are living tissue. A next reason why you can justify, a next justification that bones are living tissue is the fact that they are able to make blood cells. You look at a stone, for example. A stone can reproduce another stone. You look at a piece of metal. A piece of metal cannot reproduce another piece of metal. So then and there you would not consider a piece of metal to be living because it cannot reproduce or it cannot make another piece of metal. So those are some reasons, those are some justification in terms of you justifying your point by saying that bones are living tissues. Now let's move down to the second pointer. Make up from ground substance called matrix and blood and bone cells. So if I should ask you in terms of question for you to give me an example of the component or material that make up bone, then you can say bone cell and you can also say a matrix material. Moving down to pointer number 3. Also contain calcium phosphate and calcium carbonate. So bones basically contain these nutrients. So again, that justify that bones are living. Now moving down to the last pointer, long bones are not solid. Solid mean that, not solid simple mean that there is an internal hollow section there that is known as a bone marrow. So looking at the diagram here, you'll realize that we are seeing this labeling that said yellow bone marrow. So there's a hollow section there, or if you want to say that there's a hole in the middle of long bones. So you understand? So bones entirely, they are not solid. Now mark you, a flat bone, for example, might be solid, but not entirely. Moving down, so continue with the information explanation in terms of bones. The outer layer is called the compact bone. So let's look at this example in terms of the diagram. So the outer section of the bone, it is really compact. And why they use the term compact there is that the outer section of bones, they are called a compact bone. They are normally hard, and the main function of this section that is called the compact bone is to offer protection, meaning that the compact bone basically protect the inner sections or the inner components of the bone. So looking at this long bone, the labeling you're seeing there, compact bone, as you realize it is the outermost section there. So the outermost section would surround the blood vessels, for example. So I can ask you to give me one bone component that the compact bone protect. So you can tell me that blood vessels. So again, the question, give me an example of a component of the of a long bone that the compact bone protect, and you can tell me blood vessel. So question again asks you what the compact bone protect. You can say the bone marrow, or you can say blood vessel. So moving down, they are saying that long bones are tubular. So in terms of this term, what they mean is that there is an inner hollow section of long bones. That's why they use this term, tubular. So a piece of water hose, for example, you realize that the water hose, there's a middle hollow section there. So a water hose, you would consider a water hose to be tubular because there's an opening in the middle of it. Moving down to another pointer, red bone marrow is where red and white blood cells are made. So basically, guys, what we're doing, we're going through the different components of a long bone, for example, and it is of great importance that you know how to label a long bone. So we have the ball there, we have a cartilage, we have a spongy bone that contain red marrow, we have yellow bone marrow, we have the compact bone, we have the marrow cavity, we have blood vessel. Right, so it is of great importance that you actually know to label it. Yes, in the chat section I'm seeing Serena Thompson online now. Good morning, Miss Thompson. Good morning. Happy to know that you're able to join the class. So in terms of notes, again, the notes, the PowerPoint presentation that you're seeing on the screen now, it is posted in the WhatsApp group. Right, so later on after class you can go ahead and open it and write the notes in your notebooks, or if you have access to a printer, you don't have to write the notes, you just simply print the PowerPoint presentation. So let's move. So moving on. Right, so in terms of labeling, you should be able to, it is a must that you know how to label a typical long bone that you're seeing on the screen now. So moving on in terms of pointers, yellow marrow does not make blood cell but stores fat. So looking at the long bone, where is the yellow marrow? So see it there, label for you. Okay, it is a label for you there. So what the pointer is saying that as for the yellow bone marrow, it does not make blood cell. So that's not a function for the yellow bone marrow. Now the red bone marrow, of course, make blood cell. So the function of the yellow marrow is to store fat. So again, in terms of question, student, I can get question from this pointer, as I can ask you, what is the function of the yellow marrow? And your response to that question should be store fat. Okay? So all of these questions that you're hearing me asking you are giving you, these are the same questions I will be giving you in your monthly test or quiz. Moving on. The end of bones are covered with cartilage. Now let's look at the diagram again. As you can see, the end section of this bone cover with what is known as cartilage. So the question you should be asking now, what is the importance of cartilage? Now I can take you to the slide that have that information. It's not here. Cartilage. Alright, so I'm not seeing it there, but don't worry about it. I will be giving you, just give me a moment so I can put up that for you. Alright, so in terms of cartilage, I have the information here. Let me just increase this for you. Right. Right, so in terms of cartilage, student, so this is an example. So the blue section there showing you cartilage. So this bone, for example, would represent your knee. So the upper bone there and the lower bone. So this upper bone, it is known as the femur. Okay, so the end of it is covered with cartilage. So let's look at what they are saying about cartilage. So the cartilage, they are saying that it is a flexible, right, connective tissue with a smooth, glassy appearance. Cartilage spreads load to prevent shock between bones. So that's one function of cartilage. So cartilage basically absorb shocks. So let's say, for example, you're walking. Once you're walking or running, there's a lot of vibration. There's a lot of movement in terms of the bones that make up your legs. Those bones, they're going through a lot of stress. So in terms of those bones being damaged, the cartilage basically absorb the shock. So that's one function of cartilage. So they are saying that the ends of bones normally covered with cartilage. Moving down, tendons attach muscle to bone. So I need to go to another diagram to show you that. Right, so here we go, we have a diagram here. So this is a muscle, so the red section there is a muscle. Now at either ends of the muscle, you will see this white section. Okay, so this is a tendon. So the muscle don't attach to the bone directly. So the end of the muscle is joined onto the tendon, and then the tendon attached to the bone. So that's the white section right there at the end. Alright, so just going back a bit. So again, students, we're on this heading, this subtitle, bones, not bones, tissues that make up the human skeletal system. So right away, if I should ask you to give me one example of a tissue that make up the human skeletal system, then bone would be one. So we're going to move on to the second one now, ligaments. Right, so this is another tissue that make up the human skeletal system. So in terms of question, I can ask you to give me the tissues that make up the human skeletal system. So as for ligaments, a form of connective tissue. So connective tissue means that it will connect one body component or one body part to another. So in terms of bones joining each other at a joint, that's a function of ligaments. So if I should ask you to give me the function of ligaments, then you will tell me that ligament basically join bone to bone, and that is what the second pointer is saying. So join bone to bone, that is a function of the ligament. In terms of pointer number 3, has yellow elastin fibers which make them elastic but tough. So what that simply means is that yes, you will be having movement taking place at a particular joint. Now in terms of the movement to take place at the particular joint, then both bones have to move. Now if the ligament was not able to move, then there is no way you would have movement, because that simply means that the ligament would be extremely stiff, and then once it is stiff, then that cannot allow any movement. So what they are saying that is that ligaments, they are able to stretch, okay, and once they are able to stretch, then movement will be able to take place at the particular joint that it is located. So this is an example of the knee joint here. So as you can see, we have the upper bone there, that's the femur, the thigh bone, the largest bone in the human body, and we have the bones of the lower section there of the leg. So this bone at the top there, so the bone at the top there, it does not just sit on the bone at the bottom there. It needs something to attach them, join them to each other. So that's where ligament come into play. Now this ligament, they are saying that it is able to stretch. So the fact that it is able to stretch means that it can bend, it can allow bending to take place at the knee joint there. So let's move back. Right. So they are elastic to allow movement. So this pointer here is giving you the importance of ligaments being elastic so that movement can take place. Because again, student, if the ligaments, for example, if it was rigid, if it was stiff, then it would not be able to allow movement to take place at that particular joint. So we have gone through two tissues. Let's move down to the third one. So moving down to tendons. Now the function for tendons now is that tendons attach muscles to bone. So this is the third tissue of the human skeletal system. So we have a diagram there. So this is a muscle. So again, the red section there is a muscle. And we have the bone. So we have a bone there, we have an next bone there, and down the bottom we have an next bone that is attached to. Now when you look at the image carefully, students, you will realize that the muscle is not attached to the bone directly. So the white section that you're seeing here, this is not a part of the muscle. The muscle is the entire red section. So as you realize, the muscle fade out into this white section that is called the tendons. So the tendons join the muscle or attach the muscle to the bone. So that's what it is actually saying. So here we have another example here. So this red section at the top there, that is a muscle. So you're seeing the muscle, it is not attached directly to the bone, it actually feeds into the white section here. So all of this white section here is called a tendon. So that's why we are saying that the function for tendons is that tendons, they are responsible for attaching muscles to bone in terms of what they are made of. So made up of white fibrous protein, and that protein is called collagen in a matrix. So that's what actually make up tendons. Third pointer, this is a tough, non-elastic fiber. So what they're saying that it is non-elastic. So tendons, no stretching take place in comparison to ligaments. So ligaments are able to stretch, but not for tendon. It is the muscles that normally stretch, extend, get longer, get shorter in terms of size or length, I should say. So let's say, for example, looking at this muscle and the tendons. Now the muscle, let's say, for example, you're moving the arm at the elbow joint there in terms of you extending. Let's see if I can get a diagram. Bending. Right, so let's show you what I'm talking about. Yes, so look at this diagram now. So here we have this one showing the arm extending, this one showing it bending. Now, in order for the arm to actually extend, this muscle at the back there that is called the tricep, it will actually pull on these, basically pull these bones away from this section of the human body. So it is a muscle that is extending and not the ligament, not the tendons, I should actually say. Because what happens is that you don't want the muscle to be stretching and also the tendon stretching. Now, if you have that taking place, then no movement can take place. Because the muscle is stretching and the tendon is stretching. Then there is no way movement can take place. So the muscle is stretching and the tendon actually stay rigid, mean that it actually stay fixed or stiff. So that is how it allows the movement to take place there. Alright, moving on in terms of tissue. So your muscles, they are also example of tissue that make up the human skeletal system. So when muscles are supplied with energy in the form of ATP, they contract. So whenever a muscle contract, it means that it gets shorter in terms of its length. So looking at this diagram again, this muscle that is known as the bicep, in order for you to bend the arm at the elbow joint, then the bicep needs to get shorter in terms of its length. So that's whenever a muscle is contracting, it normally gets shorter in terms of length, and it is also much more bulky, meaning that it actually bulges up. So muscle tissue contains cells which contract to allow movement. So again, student, in terms of the tissues that make up the skeletal system, would have gone through muscles. That's one. I've gone through tendons, ligaments, and bones. So basically we would have complete 4. We're going to move into the other one, that is cartilage. But I realize that the cartilage is not on the slide, but don't worry about that, I will put it in. And here I have the information for cartilage. So basically in total we have 5 different tissues that make up the human skeletal system. So they are bones, muscles, cartilage, ligament, and of course tendon. So let's look at cartilage. So I would have started explaining it briefly while looking at bones. So basically I'll just continue on that. So again, we said that cartilage, they are flexible connective tissue. We normally say that they are glassy or smooth. Now for persons who like chicken and eat the chicken bone, you will realize that the end of the chicken leg, for example, the bone for the chicken leg, you will see a white slippery gristle section here that you can actually bite off. That is an example of cartilage. Now when you examine it, you will realize that it is extremely slippery. Okay, so cartilage, one function for cartilage is that cartilage spread the load to prevent shock between bones. Okay, it basically form a cushion like load spreading covering at the body surface. This should be it. Right, so the notes here basically giving you the functions of the cartilage at a particular joint. Now we normally said that cartilage reduce friction at a joint. Now let's say for example we have this movement taking place at this joint here. So the bones actually, so the movement, let's say for example this diagram where you have the arm being extended and bending, extending. So you're doing that. Now what is taking place is that the fact that the bone movement is taking place simply mean that friction is taking place, mean that they are rubbing against each other. But because the cartilage, because it is slippery, that ability allow it the friction to basically reduce. Now I'm seeing Alicia James asking a question, sir, what is the importance of cartilage? Very good question. To prevent bone from damaging. That's the answer. Simply mean that the fact that it actually spread the load within a particular joint mean that it will prevent the bones from being damaged. Let's say for example you're walking or you're running and you jump. So that's one importance of it. Another importance is that it actually prevent the ends of the bones from breaking, because if friction is taking place in terms of the bones rubbing against each other slightly, if it wasn't for cartilage, then the ends of those bones will basically damage. So what the cartilage does is that it reduces the friction there. So those are the importance of cartilage. Now in terms of you answering that question, students, just remember, it is just for you to recall in terms of what is the function of cartilage. So the function of cartilage can use to answer the importance of it. So you being able to give me the function of cartilage, it will be able to assist you in terms of answering that question. So you just simply need to know the function of cartilage, and then you can answer the question in terms of its importance. Wow, Alicia is asking what causes strokes. Now, in terms of this illness, this health problem, it has nothing to do with the skeletal system. Nothing at all. Now, in terms of somebody affected by a stroke, it is a circulatory problem. Okay, and a circulatory problem where a blood vessel is damaged, and once that blood vessel is damaged and bursts in the human body, then in terms of where that blood vessel normally take blood, they're going to be cut off in terms of supply. Okay, so it has nothing to do with the human skeletal system. It is basically the human circulatory system that is being affected in terms of stroke. So again, in terms of definition, a stroke normally takes place when blood supply to a part of your brain that link up with a particular body part is interrupted. Okay, so let's say for example the brain communicating with the arm, the left arm or the right arm. Okay, so stroke is basically when the blood supply to a part of your brain is interrupted. And you need to understand that the brain is sectionized into different sections. in terms of where they control. So you have a part of the brain that control the right side of the human body, a part of the brain that control the left side. So if that section there is damaged in terms of blood supply, then that section will not be able to control that body part. All right, questions coming in. So Serena is asking, sir, can cartilage repair itself? No, good question. Now, what persons need to understand is that cartilage can wear out. I don't know if persons by now would have heard of what is known as arthritis. And arthritis is a health problem where individuals feel pain within a particular joint. Let's say, for example, the knee joint or the ankle joint or the wrist joint or the elbow joint. Now, the reason why you're feeling that pain is because the cartilage would have been worn out. So what that simply means is that the older you get in terms of your age, it is the more your cartilage is going to be worn out. So there will be a time in your life where the cartilage basically wear out, and you now start feeling pain. That is now because the bones, they are literally rubbing against each other, and the nerves cells are being rubbed on directly by the bone. So that's why older persons feel pain. So in terms of repairing, at your age now, let's say, for example, there's a cut or something, then yes, of course, there will be some amount of repair in terms of cartilage. But in terms of replacing it totally, that's a total no-no. Right, so cartilage, in terms of repairing themselves, it all depends on the age. It all depends on the age. At tender age, it can do some amount of repair, but if the cartilage is damaged total, like for example, you have some persons normally like to play with the fingers, the joints of the fingers, where they say that they are popping the fingers. Then what you're doing, student, you're actually damaging the cartilage. That's what you're doing. Okay. Now, I'm looking at the clock. Persons need to remind me that class end at 10:15. It's now 10:23, so class should have ended. So I think that's it for today in terms of explanation. So next class I will pick up. So would have gone through. Let's go back. So would have looked at what is the human skeletal system. Would have looked at the different divisions of the human skeletal system, functions and tissues that make up the human skeletal system. Now, in terms of questions, I'm going to give you some questions that you're going to do for homework. So next class, we're going to go through those questions. So please, student, ensure that you complete those questions. So the question, I'm going to post the question in the WhatsApp group. I can also bring it up on the screen here, or I can post a question in the chat section for you. So students, these questions, please do them for homework. So next class, I'm going to go through them. All Alright, so those are the questions, students. So again, thanks for joining the class. As I said, I will be using this platform a lot. So I'll be using also the Google Classroom. So for persons who would have not been able to join class, I'm asking you to just send them the link and tell them that they can actually click on the link and go online, go on my YouTube channel to actually view the class. So student, thanks for joining. Take care and get ready for your next class.